Hi, this is Cindy from VintageToNew, and today we're going to make this really cute little fabric box that takes very little supplies, would be a great gift or something fun to have in your sewing room or your kitchen, just anywhere. So without delay, let's get started right away and make this cute little fabric box. I'd like to invite you to sign up for my newsletter. The link is in the description below. My newsletter includes some freebies at different times, coupons, just the latest pattern releases, stuff like that, and I promise not to spam. So let's get started on this little fabric box today. So you can make them any size that you want. You start with a square. This is a 10-inch square, and it takes a front and a back piece of fabric. You can use scraps. You could use coordinating fabrics, whatever you would like, and a little piece of batting that's slightly larger than your squares. Okay, now as you get larger, you will want something a little more firm. I made one that was a 17-inch square, and it was a little bit soft with just one piece of batting. So you may want to put some fusible interfacing on your fabric, or maybe 2 pieces of batting, something like that to give it more body. It's for you to experiment with and see what you like. So here's how we get started. So we're going to put our right sides together, like so. All right, and if you would like to, you can pin it. What we're going to do is to sew all the way around, leaving about 4 inches to turn it right side out. So if you would like, you could leave yourself a reminder of some place to turn it right side out. So now I'm going to take this and I'm going to sew a 3/8 inch seam all the way around. And the reason I do 3/8, if you do a 1/4 inch all the way around, when you go to sew this closed right here, a 1/4 inch is just not very much to work with on closing that. So let's get it sewed. So just that quick and easy, I sewed all the way around. In the corners, I did a pivot. I didn't sew off and then come back and sew across again, and I'm going to show you why right now. So now we need to trim away all of this excess batting, and we also want to trim it down so that it is right even with our stitches. So lay it down on your table, push it down with your finger, and then just trim away this batting really close to your stitches. And you need to be careful that you do not cut your fabrics that are here on the front. So just lay them down flat, fold this up, kind of hold it down with your finger, and there you go. And if you still have a lot left, go back. Just don't clip your stitches or clip your fabric. So that's really good. Right there. See how that's trimmed? So go all the way around trimming like that. And this is why we didn't want to sew off and make an X up here, because you have to be able to get in and trim away all this extra batting so we can have a nice corner. Okay, so as soon as you get that batting all trimmed away so that it looks something like that, this is the opening where we're going to turn it, and I was sure to get the batting trimmed right there too. Then we're going to snip off the corners. So you snip off that extra fabric at all 4 corners, and you clip close to your stitches, but don't clip your stitches. So do all 4 of those and then turn it right side out through the hole. So we're ready to turn it right side out. We have our batting here, and then we have our 2 pieces of fabric. You turn it right side out between the 2 pieces of fabric, and you just poke it out through that hole. As soon as you get it turned, use something like a bone folder or a chopstick. Don't use the end of your scissors, because it will poke through 9 times out of 10, and that's a really sad day. So just poke it firmly but gently to turn out all the fabric that's in all 4 corners. You want it to be nice, square, corners because these are really going to show in our finished work. So do all 4 corners. I went over and I pressed it nice and flat. I have really good corners, and here is my opening, and I turned it under when I pressed it so that it lined up just really nicely. Now you have some style options at this point. You can take it over and do a 1/4 inch top stitch all the way around, and that would close this, and you would have top stitching. I prefer to hand stitch this closed and not do the top stitching. The reason I prefer that is the top stitching, unless you do just a super good job, really shows, and it looks better without the top stitching. So if you do top stitch, be very careful. So I'm going to take and I'm just going to slip stitch this closed by hand. So I'm just going to sew this closed. I'm going to give you one of my best tips that I have used for many years. It's beeswax. If you're going to do any hand stitching, you just take your thread and put your thumb on it like this and just very gently just pull your threads through, and it will glide through and not get tangled up. And so I've done this for a really long time, and I wanted to share that with you. Some sewing things are kind of a flash in the pan and here today, gone tomorrow, but this one really works. So this is the time where there's another design choice. You can free motion quilt this, or you can quilt it any way you want. But I just took my Frixion pen and I marked it in quarters and then in between. So it's got diagonals and then each of the centers marked, and I'm just going to sew a straight line down those, and that's how I'm going to quilt this. But you can quilt it any way you want. But quilting it also makes it a little more stable and a little more body to it. So you do want to quilt it. So this next step is where you can put some of your own design into it. What you do is you flip it over so that it's in half, and if you quilted it the way I did, it's right on one of those quilt lines, which is really nice. So we're going to put in our lines that will help us fold our box. So you could use a ruler, or I have this mat, so I'm going to come up 2 inches and across 2 inches. And when I connect this line, it's going to be at a 45-degree angle. And you can't see it, I should just remark it. This is where I quilted this fabric, and you can see it matches. So I know I'm on the right track. So I'm going to do the same over here, 2 inches and 2 inches, and connect those lines. And this is my mark here. That's where I quilted, is right there. So let me zoom you in. So that's really hard to see, but here's my quilting line, and here's the new line that I just drew in. So now we take the other side and flip it in half the other way. So we're still marking on the same side, but we have folded it the other way. So I come up 2 inches and across 2 inches, add my diagonal, and just for reference, so you can see that's the line where I quilted. And then over here, I'll do the same, 2 inches, 2 inches, and go across. Now, you can leave this at 2 inches on all of your box sizes, but when I did the 17-inch square, I did 3 inches just because I wanted it to be a little higher on the sides, and you'll see what I mean. So our next step, I will sew here and here, then I'll take and flip it back to the front side again and sew it here and here. So let me do that and show you what it looks like. Okay, so these 2 here have been sewn. So now I'm going to come back to the center and flip it open this way and line it up on the edges, and I will sew here and here, and you'll have this little pouch looking thing. So let me do these two here, and I'll show you what's next. Let me turn it right side out and show you what it looks like. So we're going to flip it and push out our corners like so, and just like that, you have this wonderful little box. Looks like this, almost like a little takeout container. Okay, so before I do next steps, I'm going to push it back wrong side out, and I'm going to go press it and get rid of all of my Fix-On pen marks, and I'm going to press each one of these little flaps on the inside so that they're nice and tight, and I'm going to press them the same way all the way around the box, so like that. And I'll show you why in just a minute. Okay, so here it is with all of my little flaps pressed going one way, and most of my Fix-On pen marks are gone. All right, so when we make our basket, you have some options. You can leave these little flaps just like this inside your finished box. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to tack them down because I think it gives a little bit nicer finish to your little box. So let me show you how I'm going to do that. I have my needle and thread. I put a knot in the end, and right along this fold, I'm going to be sure it's folded over, and I'm going to work holding it. This is the top, and I'm going to put it so that my knot goes in the back so you can't see it. See, it's back inside this flap, and then I'm just going to go just through the back fabric and some of the batting that's there, and just do a little tack, probably like 3 little stitches. So there's 2 and 3, and then this one I'll tie it off. It's a lot of things to go through there, so pushing down like that saves your finger. So I'm going to do my tie off, and I'm going to do one more little knot, just going through the threads right there. One more knot, and then what I like to do in all my hand sewing is I always go inside the project, maybe like an inch or so away, pull the string tight so that it pulls your project up just a little bit, and then snip your end off, and it goes into the inside of your project and you can't see it. And so there's just a really nice little finished tack down right there. So I'm going to do that on the other 3 all the way around. Our cute little box looks like this. So now is the time we take and we really press our corners out right here, and we get a really nice little flat bottom on our box. So just like that, there it is. Now you could take it over and you could do a nice little press from corner to corner here like this to make it a sharper corner on the bottom. That would be great. And then our next step after this is we fold these little flaps down here, and I'm going to put a button on them. So I'm going to go over and press the bottom, and then I'm going to press the flaps down. So here is my little box all pressed. I pressed the bottom so that it's nice and square, and I ironed these little flaps down so I have a nice little crease right here. So our next step, I'm going to sew buttons on to finish it off, and I've bought these buttons on Amazon a few months ago, and I've been itching to use them ever since. And so I'm trying to decide if I'm going to use these big ones and sew them on here, or these cute little ones like this and sew them on. And I think I've decided to use these bigger ones. Now these buttons have 2 holes in them. You can sew them with regular thread, or I'm just going to use embroidery floss, and I'll show you how I'm going to do that. So you need to have a needle that the eye of your needle is large enough to put all 6 strands of your embroidery floss through. The part that you quilted should line up with the part down here on the side. Put your button on and come from the front and just go in and back out the second hole. And don't let the button fall off, because it'll just fall right off this string here if you're not careful. And just get it down so that there's enough left here that you can tie a knot. Just a regular old over-under knot. Get it nice and secure. And then just trim your thread. And there is that really cute button just on the side. So I'm going to do that on the other 3 buttons. So these are the 2 that I made. This one started out with the 10-inch square, and we just finished it, and I am showing it with wonder clips inside of it. And this one, I started out with a 17-inch square, and it has napkins and a little salt and pepper shaker inside. And this is the one that I mentioned. When you get up to be this size of a 17-inch square, it needs to have a little bit more batting in it, or maybe if it would have been quilted more, it would have given it a little more rigidity to it. But it's still serviceable, it's still great. And on the 17-inch square, I did 3-inch sides on it, and this one we did the 2-inch sides. So you can just play around with those proportions and see what you like. The 10-inch square using the 2-inch sides ends up with a 3.5-inch across the bottom size to the box. The 17-inch square using 3-inch sides ends up with 6 inches across the bottom. So until next time, this was Cindy from Vintage to New.